Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Sophocles' play, The Women of Trachis. So this is an interesting play for those of us who grew up with either the Disney film version of Hercules or Kevin Sorbo's Hercules, The Legendary Journeys. Because in The Women of Trachis, Heracles is kind of a dick. So basically, the play is about Heracles' long-suffering wife, Deianeira. She is at home. Heracles has been off for 15 months doing stuff. He was a slave for a year, and then he decided to follow up his enslavement by sacking a city. But he had left a prophecy for Deianeira that at 15 months, he would either be returning home or he would be dead. And since it's now 15 months since he left, she is understandably concerned. What follows in the play is a series of reversals. And that's the thing that I think is the most fascinating about the structure of this play. We have a set of situations in which a character sets something up or believes something to be true, and then something happens to change their position. Something happens to show them that they were wrong, or to complicate things, or whatever it is. And we actually get this pretty much right from the very beginning of the play. Deianeira comes out, and she starts by saying, "There's an illuminating old adage going around that declares you cannot assess the quality of any human's life, whether blighted or blessed, until they are dead. I, on the contrary, know only too well, long before I go to Hades, that my life is blighted, bitterly so." So this is an interesting opening because it starts us off in the frame of mind of challenging things that people know or things that people believe. This idea that you can't judge a person's life until they're dead is actually a really important idea in tragedy, and it shows up in a number of other plays. And so Deianeira is here starting off by saying, "Aha, you all think you know this, but here's the reality. I know that my life is terrible." So we start off with that sort of challenging of what we think we know. What we think we know is in some way wrong. And this pattern holds throughout the play. So, there's a very sort of small one. There's a very sort of small reversal right toward the beginning. A messenger comes in and tells Deianeira that that Heracles has been successful in sacking this city. His herald Lycus is in the town square of Trachis, where they're currently living, and he's telling people all this stuff. And there's this brief moment where Deianeira thinks that the messenger means Heracles is in the market and he's about to come home. What the messenger actually means is that Lycus is in the market and he's about to come back. When Lycus comes back, he brings with him a bunch of slaves, which was very common in ancient Greece. We have slaves consistently throughout ancient Greek tragedy, throughout ancient Greek literature. One of the slaves is very beautiful, young female slave named Iole. Deianeira doesn't know that at this point. She asks Lycus about this slave, and he's basically like, yeah, whatever, just slave. Don't know anything about her. And he tells her what it was that had happened. He tells her the story of Heracles sacking this city. So it starts because again, Heracles was enslaved for a year. So Deianeira asks, was sacking that city the reason he was gone for so long, so very long? And Lycus says, no. Most of that time he was in Lydia, kept there, he says, like a slave. Sold. Don't be shocked by the word, my lady, it was Zeus's doing. Anyway, Heracles was sold to a foreign woman, Omphale, and served out a year with her, as he told me. But he felt so humbled by the experience that he swore an oath that one day he would enslave the man who had made this happen, together with his wife and child, and he kept his word. As soon as he had been purified, he raised a mercenary army against the man who was uniquely to blame, he said, for that barbarity, Eurytus. And basically then Lycus sort of goes on to tell this story about how Heracles and Eurytus had been friends, but when Heracles came to visit, Eurytus was extremely rude and kicked him out, and so Heracles threw Eurytus' son off the castle walls, and Zeus was upset because Heracles didn't challenge him face to face, but attacked him from behind. And that's why Zeus had Heracles enslaved for a year. So first off, I think this is a weird speech because Lycus says, he felt so humbled by the experience that he swore an oath that one day he would enslave the man who had made this happen, together with his wife and child. So this is one of our first sort of real indications of who Heracles is in this play. His version of feeling humbled basically means I'm going to destroy a city and take people as captives. So, not great. But then the messenger, so after Lycus has told Deianeira this and taken the slaves inside, the messenger basically takes Deianeira to one side and is like, yeah, actually everything Lycus told you was a lie. He's been going around in the market being like, oh yeah, I know who that slave is. That's Iole. And Heracles sent her back especially to be his sex slave. Which of course is not something Deianeira is all that keen on as Heracles' wife. But this, again, we have this sort of reversal of this story that's initially told by Lycus, in which Heracles doesn't seem that terrible. Bit weird, the whole, like, I'm gonna conquer your city and destroy your people out of humility thing. But then we get this reversal where basically the messenger reveals and then Lycus confirms that Heracles conquered this city because he was in love with Iole. And so we have here, again, that reversal from Deianeira getting some news that she's more or less okay with to this now threatens her marriage. And we have, of course, that reversal of the impression of Heracles. Like, we could maybe understand, probably it made more sense to the ancient Greeks to respond to being humbled through slavery with the desire for conquest. I think to modern viewers or readers, that's a little bit weird, but it probably made more sense to them. So we go on a little while later, and we actually come to the sort of main event of Women of Trachis, which is that Deianeira comes up with a plan to try and save her marriage. And it's a weird plan. It's a plan that has some pretty obvious plot holes that she doesn't realize until after the plan has been set in motion. So, she's talking to the women of the chorus. And she says, let me tell you the remedy I've devised. Long, long ago, as a girl, I had a present from the shaggy-chested centaur Nisus. As he lay dying, it was soaked in his blood, and I stored it in a brazen urn. Nisus, for a fee, used to carry people across the broad sweep of the river Avenus in his arms. In his arms, not by sail or oar. He was carrying me on his shoulders in the days when I first knew Heracles and was his bride, having been displaced into the world by my father. In midstream he began to fondle me salaciously, and I screamed. Heracles, son of Zeus, swung round and let fly a feathered arrow. It whipped into the centaur's chest and lungs, and the expiring creature called out this: "Child of ancient Oeneus, you are the last passenger I carried, and I can tell you something to your benefit. Collect the clotted gore around my wound, blackened by the arrow tinged with poison from the hydra of Lake Lerna, and you will have a talisman for the heart of Heracles, so that he'll never again fall in love with another woman." Well, my dears, I remembered this, and everything the centaur told me while he lived, for after his death I locked it up in a secret place, and now I've rubbed it into this robe and done everything he said. I'm not interested in reckless remedies, and I loathe the women who go in for them, but I've done what I've done in the hope that I can work on Heracles and quell this girl with talismans and spells. So, Heracles kills Nisus. Nisus tells Deianeira, "Hey, collect up my blood as I'm dying, and you can use that to make sure that Heracles will never again fall in love with another woman." She doesn't see the potential problem with this plan until shortly after that, when she comes back out to the chorus and is basically like, "Hey, I have a bad feeling about things. I think there might be something not entirely on the level here, because the piece of wool that I used to apply Nisus's blood to the robe for Heracles has now basically been eaten by acid, essentially." And it occurs to her, as she says here, "Surely the centaur in his death throes wasn't intending to do me a kindness when I was the cause of his death. On the contrary, he tricked me. He wanted to destroy the man who had shot him." So, the penny drops. Deianeira realizes that she has sent her husband a poisoned garment, thinking that it was a love charm, and she decides that she's going to kill herself if Heracles dies. Shortly after that, their son, Hylas, who she had sent out earlier to go find Heracles, Hylas comes back, and he says, "You're a terrible wife and mother, you've murdered my father, I hate you," etc., etc. So, Deianeira has her suspicion confirmed that, in fact, she sent the poisoned garment to Heracles unknowingly, not intending to poison him. And so she goes in her room and stabs herself to death, as you do in Greek tragedy. People commit suicide all the time. We see it, for instance, in Ajax. We see it in Oedipus the King. We see it in Antigone, just out of Sophocles' plays. So she goes in and kills herself. So we've got her sort of reversal from love token to murderer. And then we get this report from the nurse, the sort of attendant, servant, whoever it is, who has been hanging out with Deianeira. When she realizes Deianeira is going to kill herself, she says, "I ran as fast as I could to warn her son of what she was up to. But in the time it took to run there and back, she had driven a sword into her side just below the liver, the seat of life. Her son, when he saw this, cried out aghast, for he realized, poor boy, that he had charged her in anger, having learned too late from the servants in the house that the centaur had tricked her to act in innocence. Her pathetic son has not stopped lamenting and crying, covering her with kisses, lying side by side, moaning and repeating how he has charged her falsely, and weeping that now he was bereft of both father and mother." So here we have another reversal, this time for Hylas, where he started out thinking that his mother was this horrible murderer who had betrayed his father, and then realized that actually she had not done that, and that he had unjustly criticized her. Shortly after this, the dying Heracles is brought on, and he basically spends the last maybe quarter or so of the play vacillating between complaining about how much pain he's in, boasting of his amazing feats and accomplishments, and then eventually tells Hylas, and threatening to kill Deianeira, who he doesn't know is dead yet. And when Hylas says actually she already killed herself, Heracles, ever the loving husband and tactful dude, is basically like, well, crap, I wish I could have killed her. So, great family values there from Heracles. But then the play basically ends when Heracles is like, all right, Hylas, take me up to this sacred mountain, build a fire, dump me on it. I don't care that I'm not dead, just fucking light me on fire. Then come back here. The girl that I've captured as a sex slave is pregnant, so you're going to marry her. Hylas doesn't really want to do any of these things, but they're his father's dying wishes, so them's the breaks.